A single moment of unfiltered passion has the power to destroy years of meticulously crafted facades in the lavish yet tense world of Forrester Creations, where fashion empires rise and fall on the whims of family loyalty and treachery. Standing in the modern conference room with a view of Los Angeles was Eric Forrester, the patriarch whose creative genius had built the legendary label from the ground up. Normally warm with the knowledge of decades in the field, his face was flushed with a mixture of anger and disappointment. His oldest son, Ridge Forrester, who had long claimed to be the heir apparent, had overreached himself this time. The atmosphere crackled with unsaid resentments that had been brewing like a storm over the Pacific, but the air was heavy with the smell of fresh fabric samples and lingering cologne. On the surface, it appeared to have started innocently enough. Ridge had planned what he described as a celebration to mark his father's retirement. However, everyone in the family was aware that it was a barely disguised coup. More than anything, Eric had never shown a desire to leave the firm he loved. Despite health scares that almost killed him, he had put his heart into every drawing and collection. However, Ridge, always the determined leader, had made the decision on his behalf. Despite the extravagant celebration, which included champagne toasts and beautiful remarks from Brooke, Steffi, and other attendees, Eric felt the hurt of being ignored in his own realm. Despite the pain, he had maintained a smile, but on the inside, something had broken. Retirement was forced upon him as a sign that his son thought he was past his prime. Tensions simmered for days, then weeks. Eric embarked on a new endeavor, discreetly working with Katie Logan on her emerging fashion line at Logan Designs. It was a bold gesture that subtly rebuked the Forrester throne and hinted at independence. Eventually, word got to Ridge, who perceived it as a direct affront to family unity rather than a father's attempt to remain relevant. Ridge had said, "You're undermining everything we've built," as he paced his office during a heated phone discussion. Calm but determined, Eric retorted that he was just creating, which was what he loved to do. However, the gap grew. With her unwavering optimism at odds with the sharp edges of father-son antagonism, Brooke attempted to mediate. Strongly devoted to her father Ridge, Steffi advised caution, and Thomas lingered in the background, adding layers of mystery with his own convoluted family history. Late one afternoon, a confrontation took place that would change everything. Long shadows were thrown through the Forrester mansion's glass walls as the sun sank low over the Hollywood Hills. Under the guise of a business meeting, Eric had called Ridge, but his real goal was conflict. "You've treated me like I'm disposable," Eric replied, his voice initially steady but tinged with the anguish of a man who has sacrificed all for his legacy only to have it taken away. As protective as ever, Ridge responded with arguments about Eric's health, the need for new management, and the company's future. Accusations of ingratitude, overstepping, and disregarding the very foundation Eric had created flew like daggers. Then it took place. Eric's hand struck Ridge's cheek with a forceful, loud slap in an outburst of rage that had been building for months. Even the birds outside were startled by the roar that reverberated around the room. Ridge stumbled back, reaching reflexively for the reddening spot on his face. His father, who had always been the voice of reason and who prioritized forgiveness and family, had struck him, and his eyes showed shock. Silence hung heavy for a moment. Eric felt regret briefly flicker in his chest before a steely determination took control. His words wounded more deeply than the punch. "You've forced my hand, son," he murmured. "Now, you'll face the consequences of your choices." Ridge felt a change in himself as he recoiled from the sudden violence. Not only was the slap physical, but it also served as a wake-up call and a shock that revealed their relationship's weaknesses. Eric's displeasure solidified into action in that moment. He would no longer allow Ridge to set the terms. With a clarity that came from years of repressed complaints, the patriarch outlined his ultimatum. Ridge would need to make amends, not only verbally but also through actions that would shake Forrester Creations to its core. A total public reversal of the retirement narrative was the first startling thing Eric made his son do. After announcing Eric's well-deserved rest, with pride at that disastrous party, Ridge now had to acknowledge her error in front of the entire fashion industry. Eric insisted that Ridge make an official announcement, possibly even a news conference, stating that Eric Forrester was not retiring and that the celebration had been untimely and foolish. Imagine the headlines: Forrester heir admits error in ousting patriarch. Ridge would be looked down upon by industry insiders, rivals like Bill Spencer who would enjoy the drama, and even family members. Brooke would be divided between her lovers, Steffi would be furious, but Eric would not back down. "You wanted the spotlight on my exit," he said icily to Ridge. Ridge's ego flared as he shouted, "Now you'll shine it on my return, and on your own misjudgment." How could the dressmaker and everlasting leader who had guided the business through innumerable crises grovel like this? However, the slap had affected not only his skin, but also his conscience. Ridge felt deep down that he had gone too far. Despite all the odds, his father's health had significantly improved, and Eric's most recent designs, those colorful, avant-garde works he shared with Katie in private, showed he still had the magic touch. In order to restore Ridge's dignity and remind everyone that the Forrester name flourished on Eric's vision rather than just Ridge's desire, Eric made Ridge eat crow in public. Eric dropped the second bombshell while Ridge, still pacing the room with his palm to his face, pondered this. At Forrester Creations, Ridge would have to abstain from some crucial choices, such as giving Eric joint creative responsibility over the next couture line. Unilateral calls are over. His father should no longer be viewed as a symbol. For the first time in years, Ridge would co-design under Eric's direction, and he would personally ask Katie Logan to join him in a cooperative endeavor, mending the Logan-Forrester rift that had caused so much pain. This was about more than just style. It was about mending past hurts and admitting that Eric's relationships with people outside of his immediate family offered new vitality. Ridge had frequently seen Katie through the prism of previous rivalries involving Brooke and others, so the thought of collaborating closely with her was nearly unbearable. It required swallowing pride, going to meetings where he shared authority, and openly supporting a crossing that would make it difficult to distinguish between opposing lines. "You're asking me to dismantle my own leadership," Ridge said in a raspy voice. "I'm asking you to remember what family means. You slapped me with your decisions. Now feel the weight of mine," Eric firmly said. The days that followed were a flurry of emotional upheaval and cunning. The first person Ridge confided in was Brooke, who had served as his intermittent support system during decades of intense love and suffering. Her palm lightly touched the slight mark on his cheek, while she listened with open eyes. "Your father loves you, Ridge. This is his way of fighting for what he built." However, Brooke also recognized the potential. Perhaps this could patch things up or, at the very least, forge new, mutually beneficial partnerships. When Steffi heard the news, she reacted as usual. "Granddad can't do this. Dad, you can't let him humiliate you like that." Her strong admiration for Eric and her protectiveness toward Ridge collided, causing rifts that reverberated through the boardroom arguments and family dinners. With his history of plots and redemption stories, Thomas was always the wild card, and he found a perverse kind of entertainment in the drama. He quietly encouraged Ridge, while making recommendations that verged on manipulation, suggesting ways to subvert Eric's increased expectations without resorting to open revolt. The company's legal expert, Carter Walton, was drawn into the conflict to prepare contracts that codified the power transfers. In a symbolic rewrite of the Forrester legacy, contracts that had previously supported Ridge's vision now contained provisions safeguarding Eric's input. Ridge practiced a statement in front of a mirror as he got ready for the public reversal, the words feeling unpleasant. "I made a mistake in assuming my father's chapter was closing. Eric Forrester remains the heart of this company, and I look forward to creating alongside him once more." Tales of father-son reconciliation tinged with power struggles would be circulated by tabloids. There was a lot of conjecture on social media. Was this real, or just another Forrester ruse? As he lounged in his Spencer Publications office, Bill Spencer laughed at the reports, already planning how to take advantage of the unrest for his own benefit, possibly by stealing talent or starting a competing campaign. The fallout from the smack compelled more in-depth discussions behind closed doors. One evening, with the city lights below sparkling like diamonds, Eric and Ridge took a seat on the expansive terrace of the mansion. While he still had fire in his veins, Eric talked about his concerns of becoming irrelevant and of seeing his life's work go away. Rich talked about his own struggles, including the burden of expectations, the ongoing pressure to live up to the Forrester name, and the lingering effects of his previous mistakes with Brooke, Taylor, and the kids. Not a lot of tears were shed, but enough to soften the edges of bitterness. Even though it was upsetting, the slap served as a catalyst for honesty that had never been attained by years of courteous evasion. However, there were costs associated with the adjustments. The public disclosure, Ridge's first startling act, landed like a seismic wave. Cameras flashed as he stood next to Eric at the hurriedly organized press conference, the two men putting on a unified look that no one familiar with their past could believe. Inquiries flooded in. Will Katie Logan's involvement dilute the Forrester brand? Does this mean a power struggle? Ridge responded calmly, but his pride ached on the inside. Eric's eyes brightened and his posture straightened as he observed with a subtle sense of contentment. This was his triumph of reclaiming rather than dominance. The second demand took longer to materialize. Eric and Ridge would often spend late nights crouched over drafting tables during joint design sessions. Colors were discussed with unexpected harmony at times and friction at others, and fabrics were selected cooperatively. Ridge's daring flair and Eric's timeless elegance were matched by Katie's designs, which offered a contemporary, approachable edge. The resultant collection teaser, which was praised as a rebirth of Forrester creations, created a stir in the fashion industry. However, not everyone was happy. While rivals flocked like sharks sensing blood in the water, some longtime employees talked about torn loyalties. Subtle and significant changes occurred in family dynamics. As Hope Logan navigated the hazy boundaries, it was possible that her own designs would collide with the new collaborations. Ever the observer, Liam Spencer provided unbiased advice that frequently emphasized how ridiculous it all was. Even the dependable Forrester support system, Donna and Pam, found themselves resolving minor disputes and making pies as peace offerings in the middle of mayhem. Weeks became a new rhythm. In the family's tale, the slap that started the fire was a moment of unvarnished truth that, ironically, strengthened ties while forcing difficult adjustments. Resilient yet humbled, Ridge found a fresh appreciation for his father's unwavering determination. In turn, Eric noticed hints of the youngster he had brought up in the guy who was now walking next to him in the limelight. In the end, the two startling developments, public reversal and shared creative reigns, were avenues for progress rather than penalties. Drama in Los Angeles, however, never really stops. Ridge began to doubt the validity of his first drive for retirement as rumors circulated that Eric would experience a health setback as a result of the stress of conflict. Taylor and Brooke found themselves in a unique alignment, calling for unity and prudence. While Thomas looked for possibilities in the shifting sands, Steffi planned how to put her father back in the spotlight. The Forrester empire persevered through it all, its foundations put to the test but unbroken. Although Eric's slap was impetuous and motivated by both intense love and intense hurt, it forced Ridge to face realities he had long disregarded. This father and son had made progress toward a future where heritage was shared rather than hoarded in the glittering world of high fashion, where beauty frequently conceals savagery. The collections would go on, bolder and more inventive than before, representing the intricate tapestry of family forged in fire as much as patterns on paper. The incident faded into memory as the months went by, and it was only mentioned in passing during board meetings or holidays. Every now and then, with a slight smile on his lips, Ridge caressed his cheek in remembrance. Designing with newfound passion, Eric realized he had done what needed to be done. This chapter demonstrated that even the most powerful slaps might result in the most unexpected alliances, continuing the bold and the beautiful story of passion, power, and repentance. With models walking the runway in designs that combine generations of vision, the fashion industry eagerly anticipated the new line's launch. Unaware of the personal cost, critics applauded the synchronicity. Backstage, Eric and Ridge nodded to each other, acknowledging in silence that although wounds healed, the lessons persisted. Shocks were money in their world, And this one had given them a shot at something more valuable than a designer dress: sincere reconciliation in the midst of chaos. However, the seeds of future strife persisted. Would Ridge accept the changes completely, or would his old behaviors come back? Could Katie's role grow without rekindling the long-standing animosity between Logan and Forrester? And what about that constant shadow of Eric's health? Although the slap had compelled them to act right now, it would have long-lasting effects on every aspect of their lives. Ultimately, the tale of that afternoon in the mansion was about a father's last-ditch effort to be seen, heard, and appreciated rather than merely rage or violence. Even if it was unstable, Ridge's two startling compromises served as the foundation for their progress. Such moments, when ambition and passion clashed and no one was left untouched, were the lifeblood of the bold and the beautiful. The hit had come from Eric's fist, but it was the heart behind it that, one dramatic step at a time, changed their fate. Eric's incredulity persisted, although his demeanor softened a little. Nobody would have expected Ridge to abdicate his position of authority given what he had battled for and given up. However, there was more. And that's not all, Ridge added, his voice straining once more as he got ready to utter the second thing, which felt even more challenging. Eric's eyes grew wide as he said, "I'm leaving." "Leaving? What do you mean?" Ridge remarked. "I mean, I'm walking away from this cycle. From the same mistakes, the same heartbreak, and the constant back and forth." For the first time since the altercation started, Eric appeared uncertain. "I can't keep doing this, to myself or to everyone else." This was not what he had anticipated. He had intended for Ridge to comprehend and think, but not to vanish. "You don't have to run away to fix things," Eric remarked more softly. "I'm not running," Ridge insisted, though there was a hint of uncertainty in his gaze. "I'm making a different decision." For once, there was silence again, but it felt different now, less explosive, more reflective. Eric observed his kid, looking for indications that this was simply another rash choice, another emotional response that would be undone in the morning. Instead, he perceived something more stable and authentic. "How is your family doing?" Silently, Eric inquired. "How about those who are important to you?" For a brief period, Ridge's countenance wavered as the question's weight was evidently felt. He remarked, "That's precisely why I have to do this. Because if I stay the way I am, I'll just keep hurting them." Eric let out a slow breath, a complex mixture of reluctant comprehension and compassion taking the place of the rage that had motivated him moments before. He didn't anticipate that his acts would cause such a severe reaction. Ridge had been awakened by a slap that had done just that, but maybe too well. "Where are you going?" Eric inquired. Ridge said, "I don't know yet. Somewhere distant enough to reflect." Eric gave a slight nod, but it was obvious he was still absorbing things. "To figure out who I am without all of this." "And you believe that you'll get that by leaving?" Ridge answered. "I think staying guarantees I'll never find it." It was difficult to disagree with the candor in his voice. They were silent for a considerable amount of time. A single talk was insufficient to reconcile the years of struggle, love, loyalty, and animosity that hovered between them. However, something had changed. Not only had the slap shattered serenity, but it had also destroyed the idea that things could go on as they were. At last, Eric moved forward with a less stiff stance. He remarked, "I didn't want it to come to this." "I didn't either," Ridge replied. After another moment of silence, Eric gently but firmly put his hand on Ridge's shoulder. "If you're going to do this, be sure it's for the proper reasons. Not because I'm angry." Ridge looked him in the eye, not out of guilt. "I am." Eric looked at him a little longer before nodding slightly. "Then I hope you find what you're looking for." Their problems were not abruptly resolved, nor was there a dramatic reconciliation. However, there was something as significant, a precarious comprehension that neither of them had before attained. Ridge retreated one step, then another, as though to see if his choice would hold. He felt as though he was already starting to leave behind the chamber that had once seemed to be the center of his universe. He took one last look around, admiring the familiar surroundings and the history that permeated every nook and cranny. After that, he turned and left. Eric stayed put and watched him leave. His chest felt heavy, a mixture of optimism and remorse that was hard to separate. This was not what he had anticipated, but maybe it was essential. Sometimes forcing a moment so startling that it couldn't be ignored was the only way to break a loop. The silence returned as the door shut behind Ridge, but it was no longer oppressive. It seemed to be the start of something unsure but potentially revolutionary. And that was something they had both wanted for a very long time.